So I'm going to do a little bit of a spiel at the start around net zero and really talk you through the design of the workshop we've got. And then we'll kind of do a more accelerated version of the carbon reduction action box, as we're calling it. And you can see here our little mascot, which is, we're calling it CRAB, because Carbon Reduction Action Plan does not anachronize very nicely. So what we're going to do today is, the plan really is, 5 minutes on why we designed it in this format, just to give you a bit of a peek behind the scenes as to the format of this. We'll then spend about 30 minutes actually designing your plan so you can see how the system works. You're going to get a carbon footprint estimate for your organization, as well as then hopefully a series of actions which we'll discuss. So 30-ish minutes, and then we'll have a Q&A towards the end if anyone would like to help facilitate this workshop, because we are looking for facilitators as well for this format and rolling it out. So there's a bit of a dual purpose here. Just to give a bit of information firstly on why we've done this. This workshop is designed to be run in about an hour. We are going to accelerate that, partly because it's me and I talk quicker, but also just because I think you're a good audience and you're a bit more advanced than the most small businesses that we engage with this workshop as well. The idea is that it's a very fun, a very lightweight way to get started with this. The challenge we find when we've engaged with a lot of small businesses, so my name's Adam, I'm from Small 99, should have led with that. We do a lot of work with small businesses on training. So we work a lot with councils or kind of local organizations to deliver net zero training for small businesses. The biggest barrier we found is, one, time, and two, financial, is they don't necessarily want to pay for training because they don't know what the value is. With this, we're hoping to provide a very low price point, as well as being very quick, time being the biggest cost for people, to get them started and to get them a bit of a plan at the end of it. So that's what we'll be ending up with. So at the end of this session, in an hour, you're going to leave with a carbon footprint estimate of your business. You'll have a carbon reduction plan as well. There's also going to be Small 99 Hero, which I'll talk you through very briefly as a follow-on if you do want more information. And there are certificates and accountability sessions that we also offer as part of this, which I won't go into today, but can do if you have more information, more questions. The idea behind this is it is very simple. It's very snappy, pun intended, to try and really help those small businesses get started. The reason why is there's a lack of confidence, and a lot of people feel overwhelmed around net zero. So this is hopefully going to make it really simple and give you some actionable insights into how you can get started. And because of that speed, it is designed for time-poor businesses who may only have an hour to dedicate to sustainability, as it were. And this is one of the barriers, and thanks to Celia at Wellbeing Farm for reminding me of this graphic, which I did about 2 years ago and forgot about, but she's been using and remembered about it when I saw it on a stand yesterday. This is how most people currently think about sustainability, is that it's this extra thing they need to learn about. It's another tool they need to learn. It's another thing they need to learn. And it's sitting outside of their existing business. Where in reality, as we try and reformat it, and that's part of this session, is the way this has been designed, is to try and put it and get them to understand it's the base of everything they're doing. It's not just solar panels and electric vehicles. This is more fundamental. The idea behind this is to really kind of break down the thoughts, is that it's not going to answer all their problems. These never are. We've only got an hour with them, but can we, if I'm in the pub with them, or if we're in a field, or if wherever we are, give me an hour with them and we can actually transform how they think about their business and realize that sustainability is an opportunity for every part of their organization. Also, we try to run this locally, and we do a lot of this through small groups in local areas, which is where it becomes really powerful, is that in-person experience for people to have that interaction and hear from other businesses. I mentioned earlier that the biggest issue is the lack of confidence that small businesses have, and just being in a room full of other people also saying they don't know what to do has been massively powerful at unlocking them to actually then do something about it. And this is the biggest challenge that I find with Zoom webinars, is they still have that experience, but it's not the same as if they're sat next to someone going, no, I can't get solar panels because the councils are being really difficult about it. So this idea of bringing people together with those non-technical solutions to say this is actually very simple to do, this doesn't have to be complicated, you're already doing stuff, and hopefully we'll come out of that as well with some examples of what you're doing. We do try and recommend that the first session is always that kind of in-person group experience as well, to build that element. There's also a little bit of psychology, I guess, behind this, looking to Val for confirmation there, but there is this thing called conditional cooperation, where people are more likely to do stuff if they have been with others who are also saying they're doing it. Friend groups are a great example of this, is you're far more likely to watch a TV show or something, or go on holiday to a destination that your friends are talking about, regardless of the logic of that. And this is the thing, is we're at a point where climate action is an emotional barrier. It's not a logical, it's not a technological, it's not financial, it's purely emotional in my mind. and we need to sell climate action much better. And hopefully this is a way to do that and really punch through. Speed, again, this is the biggest barrier. Climate content can be quite dry, and I think that's another barrier, is that a lot of this can feel like it's quite doom laden. This is really not talking about that at all and going, look, let's just focus on your business. What's going to make you more profit and more money as part of this? How do we get you going? So hopefully we'll come out of this with that accelerated experience for them to go on to Climate Fresk or carbon literacy training if they need or want kind of further information. Before we get stuck in, just want to do some kind of myth busting around net zero, because one of the biggest barriers we still have is that carbon neutral and net zero get confused all the time. And there's been a lot of shifts in the past year, really, around the definitions of net zero. Not shifts, but reinforcement, I guess, of net zero, and especially the ISO standards. If you look at something like carbon neutral, if you measure your carbon footprint, you've got 100 tons. Carbon neutral essentially means you offset that 100 tons. The differences really are that sometimes it does only include carbon dioxide, but there is also no need for reduction with this. This is purely a static piece where you're offsetting your emissions entirely by buying offsets. And those offsets can be accredited, and there's certain requirements that they go through as well. And essentially businesses are throwing money at the problem. This is somewhere where I'm seeing a lot of businesses, probably about 3 years ago, they did a lot of this. They're now realizing that people are catching up. They need to do more. They want to accelerate that. There is PAS 2060, so it is a certified standard, and carbon neutral in my mind is a great stepping stone, but they need to be doing a lot more with this, which is where the ambition for net zero is coming in. And we're seeing this a lot more now where supply chains are requiring this, and legislation is. So just to give a bit of a definition so we're all on the same page with net zero, the idea is that if you have a footprint of 100 tons, you will then reduce that down to 10 tons, and then you can use offsets for the remaining 10%, or 10 tons. The middle bit is the key thing here, is that we're seeing a lot of requirements from supply chains that businesses need to align with the 2030 reduction target, which is 50%. That sounds scary. It is fairly possible through some of the actions on these cards. As an example, if you're currently serving beef curry and you switch to a chickpea curry, that is a 95% reduction. So immediately you can start making these very deep cuts in your footprint with behavior change. It doesn't have to be new technology, but even things like LEDs, they're about an 80 to 90% reduction as well. And I appreciate some of you already know this. So the main thing, action is key. So we're looking at alignment of 50% reduction by 2030, 90% reduction by 2050 or 2045, depending on your council area or if you're in Scotland. So that 10% has to be carbon removal. And this is all aligned with the Science Based Targets Initiative. We are seeing other standards aligned to this as well. And this is where I think it's really interesting on the supply chain side, because I was talking to someone the other day from Microsoft. Someone who's in Microsoft supply chain, and Microsoft are requiring a 55% reduction by 2030 across the kind of the technical scopes on this. So they were suddenly quite panicked because they're like, how do we do this? And the answer is they probably can't, because they are a small business that is fully remote. They don't drive anywhere really. They're all working from home. So it is then a case of, well, how do you then tell that story? How do you navigate that? And that's hopefully where this sort of workshop we'll go through in a minute helps them have confidence in their story, and they can stand behind that and say, well, we can probably reduce it by 45% by the natural decarbonisation of the grid, but there might be things that are outside of our control there. And that's probably fine, to be honest, in terms of getting past Microsoft's supply chain problem. It's more that we're seeing a market where no one's saying anything at the minute, and that's the biggest barrier. Another example, just very quickly, to provide a bit of picture around what's happening in the market of net zero, or within the industry. And this is more about the speed than anything else. So we saw in April 2022, the NHS weighted all of their contracts for 10% net zero and social value weighting. So saying that's how any new suppliers are going to be measured. 2023, they updated that with PPN 0621, which is a government framework where a carbon reduction plan is required for any contract worth £5 million or more. 2024, this is in 2 to 3 months' time. We're now seeing that all new procurement that is going through the NHS requires that same level of carbon reduction plan. So within that 2-year gap, we saw the ambition go from this is something to consider to this is a requirement that is quite detailed in what you need. That carbon reduction plan is quite difficult to pull together unless you've got a very simple framework like CRAB, where it becomes a lot easier to get started quite quickly, which will probably get you past that procurement process unless you're a really big organisation doing a big tender. The best thing here as well is that in terms of looking to the future, 2027, they're going across all 3 scopes. I'm not going to go into scopes today, but there is an element here of basically requiring the entire footprint to be measured rather than just one part of it. So this is going to be an increased need. Life cycle analysis by 2028, where the product itself, so if I'm buying this and supplying this to the NHS, what's the carbon footprint of that product? And then we start seeing restrictions more heavily come into basically the existing supply chain that's not complying there. In terms of that measurement, we can see we've got a banner on the left-hand side for our new measurement tool, which is coming in a month or two. You're going to use a very lightweight version that's still our kind of alpha tool of that today. The main thing is that this is going to be a journey, and carbon footprints aren't something that you start with and then do immediately. It is going to be a case of building it up over time. So we've got general guidance such as this workshop where you'll get an idea of your footprint in a very top level way. It then might be that you go on and after this workshop use spend-based accounting or carbon accounting, things like Sage Earth or Ecology Zero or any of those other platforms that do that financial data planning. Ideally, you're going to need to get to activity-based, which is then going, well, you might have spent £100,000 last year on petrol. Activity-based is then going, how many miles did you actually do with that petrol? And really fine-tuning it a lot more to have that confidence that it is accurate. Carbon footprints are never going to be entirely accurate. And I don't think that's going to be the case for 5-10 years, really, just because there's so many assumptions. And even if you look at the government data and the way we're actually the government data sets that we're measuring on are produced, that is an average on an average of an average quite often. So perfection is something not to strive for. I think we're in a position where just having an idea and thinking about your footprint and your impact in a broad way is really the key thing we need to be driving, especially small businesses to understand, and that gives and empowering them with the tools to go, look, you are in control of your own destiny to an extent, essentially, to an element here, especially if they're selling products and going, well, actually, you might have plastic-free packaging, but what you're selling, is it full of plastic? Because people aren't thinking in that way, and that's the biggest barrier, is they're not thinking of that whole life cycle assessment in a more fundamental way. Footprints are also going to go up in that the more data we start gathering, the more that's going to be. So there's a challenge here around communication of going, actually, what does this look like? How do you communicate honestly, transparently, and effectively the footprint as you increase and as you start measuring more and more? Yeah, so that's that. Let's go over crowd now. We've got 5 different cards here now. So we've got energy, waste, transport, buy and sell, and systems, I think. Yes. We're going to try and go through them in that order. Hopefully they are, but it might be that I'm not them. So on energy, we've got a list on the back, and you can see we've got 5 different ideas of things we're going to do. And what we're going to simply do is go through and tick them as either done, doing, or do later. So LED bulbs we've already discussed of like, have you done that? And it might be, well, no, you might have some LEDs, you might not have loads. You might sort of go around and check those lamps to make sure that they are LED. So that's something you can mark as doing. Smart plugs, again, that might be something we can look at and start engaging with. That might be doing. Smart meters, if you're in rented premises, you probably can't get a smart meter very easily, and therefore that's something we're going to part as do later, because it's something we're going to look at in future. So what I'll do is for energy, just very quickly go through those 5 cards and let me know how you get on. And there's a space at the bottom for anything else you're doing on your energy emissions that you might have thought of. So we'll discuss that, because typically these then do start prompting more thoughts.